Hey everyone, this is Mahira, aka MC Aquila, and I am the creator of two fan comics, Triforce of Power, a Legend of Zelda fan comic that has been ongoing since 2015, and MOONBLAST, a Pokemon comic that has been going on since spring of 2021, so it's almost a year old. Yikes. Anyways, so today I wanted to talk about pros and cons of fan comics, mostly because I find fan comics to be really fun and interesting, and secondly because there's really not that many people talking about fan comics. I did a little search on YouTube, and okay, I'll admit I didn't spend that much time, but if you search fan comics, most of what you'll get are fan comic like dubbing or fan dubbing of comics, which is really cool, but not the same thing. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about this real quick because these are things that I wish that I had known, and I just think they're really interesting. And yeah, so first let's look at the pros of making a fan comic. I would say that, well, the first pro is that like you don't have to world build very much. For me, this is my top pro. This is some people wouldn't really care about this very much because a lot of people really don't bother with any world building with fan content, and like that's fine. But I'm a perfectionist, and I also really appreciate sound world building and in anything in any stories. So world building good world building takes a lot of time and energy and effort, both to just make it solid and true and consistent. And whenever you're world building from scratch, or if you're trying to have something set place in the real world, like you still have to do a lot of research, and you still have to make sure that everything fits, everything is consistent, everything fits the time and era and place and culture, whether it's fictional or not. And then if it is not fictional, then you need to be extra sure to make sure that the culture and setting, etc., that you've chosen to write about is true to reality, because otherwise it's just not going to be, as good. So yeah, world building is a lot of work, but whenever you're doing a fan comic, you do not have to world build as much. It saves you a lot of time, saves you a lot of energy. And if you want to flesh out the world, or if some of the world building from the original source wasn't very good, you still have places to start. Like, when I wanted to world build the Gerudo culture in my Triforce of Power Zelda fan comic, like, there's a lot to go from the games. Like, they're in the desert setting, what kind of buildings are they using? What's their, like, they were using horses, so, like, there's some influence of, like, the Arabic culture. Is that correct pronunciation? Anyways, so yeah, and then like Breath of the Wild brought a lot of other things with having their culture be more developed, and just having them travel more, and so there's a lot of material and inspiration to draw from. So I wasn't being like, oh, I don't know which cultures to research for inspiration. It's like, no, it's pretty obvious that they had some cultures in mind whenever they were developing them, so I can use that. So yeah, ironically, I did wind up being inspired more by Indian cultures rather than Arabic cultures, and also by Viking cultures, but that could be, the characters in my comic could be their own video. But anyways, it's a lot of, you can dive deep with the world building, but it's so much easier in a fan comic because you are not working from scratch. The second pro for me, and for a lot of people, I think this is like the biggest pro of doing a fan comic, is instant readership. People already love these characters, this comic, this world that you're doing the comic about. You don't have to work as hard to convince people to read it. And a good example of this is what I call comic pitch posts on Tumblr, where people throw out like a concept for like what could be a fan comic, and they're like, here's my Triforce switcheroo comic where Zelda has the Triforce of Power, Link has the Triforce of Wisdom, and Ganondorf has the Triforce of Courage, and Link and Zelda hate each other, and Ganondorf is, I don't know, he's dating Zelda and it becomes a love triangle, ooh, or, you know, whatever. But like these posts, which are just like concepts, I mean, usually they have amazing art. They usually do. There's such good art. Have tons of notes, tons of responses, and it's just some, you know, art and some writing, and people are like convinced, they're on board, like they would read this comic. And that's just the first, you know, initial post basically. And the majority of those do not become comics, but that's a case-by-case basis. And I mean, I'm not trying to throw shade on people who just do the quote-unquote what I call pitch posts, because it takes a lot of time to do a fan comic. So like I'm not trying to throw shade, but the positive response that these posts get just goes to show you that like you really don't have to fight hard to get an audience. I mean, sometimes you do. That's a case-by-case basis, but it's not nearly as hard as trying to get an audience for an original comic where you don't already have a pre-built fan base. Unless if you already have a fan base from other original comics you did, but that's another topic. So anyways, yeah, so that's pretty awesome. Oh, and the third pro, and this is more of an artsy pro, is that you learn a lot, but like with less effort. Because like, let's say you want to draw a town in your comic, well, you don't have to like go research how that town looks. Like you just have to look up on a wiki and you can get a lot of references for the town. And you don't have to design things from scratch because, you know, that's already designed for you. And you get to learn from the design and character design choices and setting design choices and etc. that the people who made the original content already made. And often like there's a lot to learn, and it's amazing. That's one thing I really enjoy, and that's one of the main reasons that like I am staying constantly motivated with my Pokemon comic. Like there's a lot of reasons I love it, but being able to draw those Pokemon character designs is both really fun and also just I learn a lot. I learn a lot by doing it. The almost all of the character designs for the Pokemon characters, that is the Pokemon themselves, the designs are so good. Like they're so good, y'all. Like I can't even. Of course there are exceptions, but anyways. So yeah, you learn a lot, but a lot of the work's already done for you, but you're going to learn a lot just by learning from what the other people have already done. It's pretty awesome. It's a fun way to learn, I will say. The fourth pro is, you can get more involved with the fandom and meet more fans personally. So like, I'm not very good at socializing online. I'll fully admit, but even I have, you know, I've been very fortunate to, you know, meet some quote unquote meet some great people and have some really lovely patrons who I enjoy interacting with on Patreon. I don't have a Discord, but I know a lot of people do start Discords for their fan comics, and they form really lovely little, you know, internet community or big internet communities that way. So, you know, you get to, even if it's just online, you get to meet a lot of people who already have a shared interest with you, and it's really fun. So yeah, and like, even if you don't make that much effort, like there's like, you know, like me, like I make effort, but it's I don't know. It's just, I know I could be more extroverted. It's not easy. Okay, moving on. I guess my main point is that even if you're just shy and introverted or whatever online, you still get the chance to meet a lot of people and do things. Like I've been part of 2 zines that, like, I definitely don't think I would have been a part of them or invited to join them or notified about them if I wasn't doing TRIFORCE of Power. And I am very grateful for those experiences. I was very glad to be a part of them. So, so it's pretty awesome. Oh yeah, and the 6th pro is just, it's fun. I think that goes without saying. Like, if you love a video game or movies or what have you enough to want to make comics about it for free, and comic making is a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, y'all. Then like, chances are like you're really gonna have fun with it, and it's fun. It's not only just fun making it, but it's fun like seeing reader response and getting reader feedback, and often like getting ideas from readers whenever they're like, you should make this happen. And sometimes it doesn't work, but a lot of the time whenever people are like, oh, this would be awesome, I'm like, yeah, that would be awesome. So like it's really fun. Yeah. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows, though there are some cons to making fan comics. And the first is that your audience is awesome, but there is less carryover between like fan comics and original stuff versus like original to original stuff. Going by my personal observations, okay? So like this is not going to hold true for everybody, but in general, I think that if somebody has like a Nintendo fan comic and then they go to making their own original comic, let's say you're going to get about 5 to 10% of your readers from the Nintendo comic going to read the original thing, okay? Whereas if you have 2 original comics, and especially if they're of a similar genre, you're going to get a higher percentage. It's tough to say what the percentage would be, but I would hazard that it's going to easily be 15-20%. It really depends on the comic and your interaction with your readers. But in general, if you go to make a new original comic after or in addition to doing a fan comic, you're generally just going to see fewer people going over from the fan comic to the original stuff. And this isn't bad. Like, this is totally normal. Like, people coming for the fan stuff and then not going into the original stuff is as old as DeviantArt, I guess. Like, it's just, it is what it is. You know, we've all been there where, you know, somebody was making a fan comic we loved, and then they started to make an original story, and it just wasn't our thing. It happens. And yeah, so like I include that as a con, because if you were just making original stuff, maybe you might be able to retain more of your audience. But I mean, that doesn't really matter for everybody, I guess. You know, like that might not be your goal. But it's just, I think it's good to know that before you start off. Because again, that might not be your goal to get tons of audience who will, or readers who will stick with you for a long time, but maybe that is your goal. So maybe, you know, original comics might be more your thing. Oh, one final thing is that genre also matters too. So like, let's say that your Nintendo fan comic was like a really cute Zelda and Link romantic comic, and it was set like kind of in a real world setting, so like a real world AU, and it was very like sweet and kind of like a shoujo thing, I guess. So let's say you did that fan comic, and then you started doing an original comic that is like an intense horror with like gore, and it takes place in like a let's say hard sci-fi setting. Yeah, there's not tons of genre carryover there. I'm not saying that there aren't people who are gonna like both, because there totally are. But yeah, those are two pretty different genres. So the odds of the readers of the how to put it, like it's basically a rom-com going over to read your hard sci-fi gory horror are a little bit lower. So that's another thing. Okay, so the second con that I wrote down is wacky fandoms. So every fandom is different, and some fandoms are more volatile than others, and this is beyond our control, because there's nothing we can do about that. So whenever you are making a fan comic, if you do the quote-unquote wrong thing, you know, there's always the chance that you might attract hate. And so I've never seen this happen for a fan comic, but I did see this happen for a fanfic writer. And this was just like a DeviantArt fanfic writer, okay? Like, this wasn't like a big name on fanfic.net or whatever. And like, she could have pressed charges from the things that people were doing for her. I don't know if doing to her. Like, I don't know if she ever did, but like, it was bad. People were being really cruel and just mean. And it's just like, it's insane. Like, y'all, please don't do that. Like, it is never worth stalking and harassing anyone over anything, especially not because they're AU crossover fanfic harms your sensibilities. Like, I don't even know. Like, there's just no excuse. But anyways, the main point is right. So if you are going to make a fan comic, and it's just good to be aware of if there are certain groups or people in your fandom who are more likely to, be mean. It's just good to be aware of that, because if you start seeing that, like, you're getting these posts directed at you, or if you start getting these questions that are obviously meant to, like, trap you and start, do people still say flame wars? I don't even know, but y'all know what I mean. Like, whenever people send you a question and it's obviously meant to stir up controversy. So basically, if you identify who these people are, what they do, and what they might target you for, and how they might do that, then you can just kind of prepare yourself to, know when to block this person, or when to not reply to that message, or, what have you. Yeah, so, but hopefully this will never ever happen to any of us. So anyways, this third con is much less heavy. It's limited merchandising and limited income. So, so whenever I started the Pokemon fan comic, I was really looking forward to making merchandise on websites like Redbubble, because at least a few months ago, whenever I was trying to do this, I was, you go on Redbubble, and there were so many, like, obviously fan-made Pokemon products, and they were doing really well, and I was like, yeah, I went in on this. And I mean, it looked pretty awesome and fun. So I had a few designs, and I uploaded them, and Redbubble refused to post them. They said it was violating copyright, and I'm like, yeah, okay, but, like, if these things which I drew myself are violating copyright, then why are people being allowed to sell quote-unquote designs that are literal screenshots directly from the anime? Like, I don't have a problem with them not wanting to sell fan content. Like, that's totally fair. But the way that they were handling was not cool to me personally. I mean, maybe they're handling it better now, but I'm sure that this is not exclusive to Redbubble, where the website seems to change its mind on what they will allow and what they won't. And there's also the fact that at the same time I was uploading designs from TRIFORCE of Power too, which I'll be honest, I really didn't like them as much, except for one, which I'm still thinking about selling somehow someday. But anyways, they accepted those, and I'm like, these have characters that don't belong to me too, so, like, why are these accepted but the Pokemon ones aren't? And I'm sure there's some kind of legal thing or whatever going on there with their copyrights. But yeah, the inconsistency was very strange, and then there was also the fact that, like, they currently, at that time, I guess they had signed an agreement with basically Cartoon Network, so you could sell stuff related to Cartoon Network shows, like Over the Garden Wall was one that I saw. And I was like, well, okay, that's cool, but, like, when is that going to change? I guess that contract or whatever that they have with them could change in the future. And if you were developing a stream of income, even if it's just, like, a smaller one, which is pretty common, but you were developing a stream of income from your merch on there, and then, a few months later, they're like, well, our contract ended, so you can't sell with us anymore. And, like, again, like, that's totally their right to do that, but it just means that these kinds of websites are not very reliable whenever you're making fan content that you would like to sell. And yeah, I guess this is, like, one of those things that should have been obvious. It's just that the alternative is making your own store, which is totally fine, but whenever you make your own store, you have a lot more expenses on your side, and there's also the fact of, because, I mean, and yeah, it's a lot more time, too. So, like, it's just a lot, because the cost of opening and running that store could easily start to, be more than any money that you're making over the merch. So, yeah, I guess this is a quote-unquote con on a case-by-case basis, because a lot of people seem to really thrive off of having their own stores, and just they don't care about or use anything like Redbubble, and that's probably the best thing to do. But for a lot of people, especially if you have a smaller audience, or you just don't feel your designs are where you want them to be, I am in that boat. opening a store can be intimidating because it's so easy for the cost to outweigh any profits you're making. So yeah, that's definitely kind of a bummer. I guess it's just reality. Yeah, I guess it's one of those expectations versus reality thing where it's like, oh, I expected to maybe make some money pretty easily off of Pokemon stuff, and reality was like, you deluded fool. Anyways, so lastly, the last con that I put down is that there aren't a lot of fan comics out there, but there are enough to basically make your comic replaceable. That sounds really bad, and I don't think this is true for all readers, but whenever you are in a fandom where people are making a lot of fan comics, it basically means that if you stop making yours, people won't quote unquote care as much. That sounds really bad. I don't know. I guess it's just kind of like, I guess this kind of goes back to the topic of like reader loyalty and things like that. But again, this is a case-by-case basis. And like, yeah, I guess this depends on like the person, but I don't know. Like, actually, I guess this is kind of a pro. So like, let me put it this way. If you're in a fandom where you have a lot of other people making fan comics, this means that you have more leeway to be kind of just doing this fan comic on an experimental level, because if you stop making it, people are less likely to be upset. And honestly, okay, like when people's response to you going on hiatus or whatever, really that should not determine whether or not you go on hiatus. But I know, like many artists such as me, we can be sensitive, so the idea of people being mad at us because we quit a project or put it on hold or whatever is pretty intimidating. And for a lot of us, it can be really nice to know that, like, you know, there's a lot of other comics out there for this, and my readers won't be very upset with me if I quit, because there's a lot of other stuff that they could read that is pretty similar to this, or at least is in the same fandom. So, I feel, yeah, I shouldn't have written that as a con, like, because there being a lot of other fan comics out there means that, like, you have more room to start one and quit one and experiment with things as you want to. I mean, I'm pretty sure no one cares that, like, there's those quote-unquote pitch ideas on Tumblr where they never make a fan comic out of it. I mean, with a couple exceptions, I don't really care. Like, there were a couple where I was like, oh, I really hope they do a comic out of this, and they never did. And I was like, oh, that's a bummer. But, I mean, I guess, anyways, this is going off of a different tangent. The main point is that there are a lot of other fan comics out there, and whatever you do is going to be unique. But I feel like a lot of readers will be more understanding of a fan comic being more experimental. So I guess, yeah, that's actually kind of a pro. And this is just my experience. You might run into a situation where, like, somebody does a fan comic in an experimental way, and then they kind of just stop doing it, and then everyone in that fandom is angry. I have no idea if that would happen, but I mean, I guess it could. But anyways, so the pros and cons making fan comics. This list obviously is not extensive, just some things that I've observed or that I have run into or whatever, and yeah, just things I wish I knew. And yeah, I do love fan comics. The different cons I mentioned, like, I feel like if you really want to make a fan comic, these are not going to stop you. And I mean, they don't stop me. So, yeah. Let me know in the comments if you've ever made a fan comic or a fan fiction or thought about doing one, and if you ever quit and, you know, how that worked out, or, you know, I mean, obviously not everybody likes to talk about that, but, you know, I feel like people should be allowed to quit and should be allowed to share like what they learned from the experience, you know. Especially whenever it's free content that you're not getting paid for. Anywho, yeah, I hope y'all have a great day, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Alright, bye-bye.